as a financial advisor. I've helped people from all different walks of life. And I've noticed some traits of people that unfortunately are likely never going to be able to retire. And in today's video, I'm going to share with you what 5 of those traits are. 3 of them are financial traits and 2 of them are non-financial. And then I'll share my thoughts on how you can maximize the likelihood of you being able to retire and enjoy your retirement. So let's jump in. The first one, unfortunately, is debt, high-cost debt, credit card debt, and student loan debt. Let's start with student loan debt. You may be thinking, hey, Azul, when people are getting ready to retire, there's not many people that still have student loan debt, right? Well, I would think that too, but you know what? You and I would be wrong. This chart here shows the percentage of student loan debt holders per age group. And you can see people 50 to 59, it's almost 1 in 6 of everybody to 50 to 59 still have student loans. And if you look and say, okay, well, do they owe much money? Unfortunately, they do. If you look at this chart here, 58 to 76-year-olds, the average person still owes $7,000 on their student loans. Now, in all fairness, this might be because they helped out a child pay for college and they co-signed for these loans, and unfortunately, they're on the hook for them. Or it might be that they went back to school later in life, whatever the case is. So that's student loans, and it is a big deal. Credit cards are also a big deal, right? It's a way that you can kind of bridge your cash flow gap, and you can make things work out. You can spend more money, you can do things that you want to do, and which is fine as long as we pay it off. But if we let those amounts continue to accrue, guess when eventually it reaches a head? Guess when the game stops? It stops when you're in your 50s or your 60s and you say, I'd like to retire. But you know what? You can't retire because you've got these credit card payments that you still have to make on. So all along the journey, the path has been easier, right? You could buy something for $100 and only pay $2, $3, $4 a month for that. But now it's time to pay the piper because it's been accumulating and many people have made their minimum payments. It's not unusual for somebody with $10,000 of credit card debt to have, a minimum payment of under $200. And boy, it's a lot easier to write that check for $200 than $10,000. But then what do you do at the end of your life? Well, not the end of your life, but at the end of your working career when you want to pay that off so that you can retire so you don't have to worry about it. Well, you're stuck, right? So that's unfortunately the number one financial trait that I see is just folks that have a lot of debt and it's hard to pay off. Now, people ask me, well, what about a mortgage? And that gets complicated because just a few short years ago, people were able to get a mortgage at some people under 3%, 2.5%, 3%. And if you've got a mortgage at that rate, probably the math says, the quantitative answer, the math says you should probably keep it. But the peace of mind factor for many of us might say, I don't want to have a mortgage in retirement. So that's a harder decision. If you're paying a mortgage rate like we've seen most recently, 6.5%, 7%, 7.5%, even 8%, they're both the math and the peace of mind factor, the sleep at night factor, would say probably best to pay that off before you retire. But if you're in between those two, that's where it makes sense to work with an advisor. None of what I'm sharing with you today is advice, just things I want you to be thinking about. Okay, so the first thing we talked about was debt. The second one that makes it hard for people to retire and sometimes keeps them from ever retiring is the inability to delay gratification. The inability to say, I'm going to sacrifice today me in order to benefit tomorrow me, in order to benefit retired me down the road. Folks that have lived their whole life not being willing to make that trade-off and say, I'm sacrificing today for a better tomorrow. Well, if they hadn't made that sacrifice, if they hadn't been putting money away, then unfortunately, again, now it's time to pay the piper. They didn't make that delayed gratification. They didn't postpone things. They didn't save that extra money. And And now it's a difficult situation. They're probably going to have to keep working. And my heart goes out to folks in that situation. And then what happens if they have a health issue and it becomes really hard to work? So unfortunately, that's another trait that I've seen. Another one that's going to be helpful both before you retire and after you retire, but if you haven't been doing it, it's hard to reach the financial goals, is people that have difficulty tracking their money, seeing where they're at. Now, I'm not saying you need to do a detailed budget and input everything that you spend your money on. If that works for you, great. It doesn't work for me. What my wife and I do is we set a goal. We want to save a certain amount of money every month. And as long as we're saving that money, whether we're spending extra disposable income on going out to eat or buying something that on Amazon that we think we would enjoy, or maybe we go on a vacation, however we spend that money in the different categories, it's fine as long as we're able to save whatever that savings goal is. And then if we go 1, 2, maybe 3 months and we don't hit that goal, then we look deeper and we say, what's going on? So a common trait for people that can't retire is people that have a hard time doing that. So that's getting up to retirement. Now in retirement, this is super important. Being able to track your money and track your expenses is important because let's say you planned on retiring and you did the numbers and you say, okay, we have enough to retire and I'm just making up numbers. We're going to spend $5,000 a month. Well, if you find, I can tell you as a financial advisor for over 20 years, if you tell your financial advisor, we're going to spend $5,000 a month and you end up spending 6 instead of the 5, it can change the plan and it can change it materially and maybe even dramatically. So if that's your situation, keep your financial advisor in the loop. If you're doing it yourself, just know that even $500, if it happens every month, if it happens once or twice a year, is it probably going to move the needle? Probably not. I don't know. But you can run the numbers. But if it happens often, then maybe you need to reevaluate things and say, is this a problem? Is this not a problem? And because things like this are super sensitive, that's where when people use Excel spreadsheets to come up with their retirement plan, boy, I think that's a really risky thing. I think either you want to have confidence when you retire and either use a financial advisor or use good software that's robust. I like the software by the company that used to be called New Retirement. They're now called Bolden, B-O-L-D-I-N, bolden.com. It's super powerful software that allows you to analyze all these different what-if scenarios. In the description of this video, I've got a link for Bolden. They're not sponsoring this video, but the link is an affiliate link. You're going to pay the same price, but I get a little bit that helps support the channel. So Bolden, BOLDIN.com. Okay, so those are the financial reasons that people have a challenge with getting ready to retire. And then there's the non-financial reasons, and sometimes these can be even bigger. And those include, these can be people making really good money and having really substantial retirement accounts, but they're not ready to retire, and it's going to be hard for them to retire because all of their identity, all of their purpose in life is tied in through work. They haven't done a good job of developing an identity and finding hobbies, finding passions outside of work. And that makes the mental transition hard. So that was number 4. Number 5, I kind of touched on, which is they don't have passions. They don't have hobbies outside of work. And a bonus one is they don't have many relationships, strong relationships, deep relationships with people outside of maybe their spouse. They have work, and then they have their spouse as their relationship, and that can put a lot of pressure on the spouse, and it can also put a lot of pressure on that individual, because one of the things that is a predictor of an unhappy retirement is if you don't have several meaningful relationships. So taking the time to do that. So what do you do if you find yourself in that situation? Well, one of the things that I think you do is you start taking the time to enjoy the journey. These are for the non-financial aspects. And prepare yourself for retirement. And that's why I made this video up here that talks about 7 things to stop doing as we get ready to retire in order to enjoy our journey in our 50s and 60s until we do retire. Thanks for watching this one. I'll see you in the next one.